Wars is a cycle of hatred. Alliances forged and broken. We have paid the price for sharing this world. And we have forgotten what makes us strong.
Close ranks! Advance has won! Lordaeron will be ours! My king, we have her cornered.
Keep firing!
Stand as one for the Alliance!
Hello, and welcome to our third episode of Midnight Launch News. Today is January 31st. I'm David.
And I'm Dan.
And today we have a special guest, because today is going to be all Blizzard. All Battle for Azeroth, with a little bit of Overwatch sprinkled on top. Our guest today is Pedram, very close friend of mine. Plays World of Warcraft with me. Pedram, why don't you go and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experiences in World of Warcraft.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Super excited to get to chat with you guys. I'm a big Blizzard fan. I started back in the days with the original Warcraft, back when it was, War Strategy. Played StarCraft, Warcraft 2, all the expansions, and I just have always been following the Blizzard kind of cadre of really high quality games. I've been to BlizzCon like 6 times. I'm a total fanboy, so I'm really excited to get to talk to you guys about this stuff.
Someday I'll go to BlizzCon.
Oh, and we will have fun.
We will have so much fun. And Dan, you're gonna have to come down from Canada.
I will. I was literally there like 3 weeks before the last BlizzCon. I was down in Anaheim. So I saw them starting to put
saw them setting up, and you're just like, no, why do I have to leave? I want to stay.
I didn't even know that it was happening. Even I was like, I guess BlizzCon is coming.
You know, I've called you a casual before, and I'm going to call you a casual again. How can you play World of Warcraft and not know when BlizzCon is?
Oh, it's because I'm a filthy casual.
Filthy casual.
I was actually lucky enough to be there the year they announced Overwatch, and I was one of the first probably, I want to say maybe 150 people to get to play the demo.
Oh, and that's cool.
That's pretty awesome.
Absolutely incredible. I had such a blast. It was one of those moments that you're just like, the gaming community just was just incredible. It was so wonderful. I feel so blessed to have been a part of that moment.
Everyone is on their feet. Everyone's cheering. You can like feel the electricity within the crowd.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And everyone's just like feeding off of everybody else's energy.
Oh yeah, when they played that opening cinematic, it was incredible.
Absolutely. Well, we are definitely going to talk about Overwatch quite a bit because there are a few changes coming down the pipeline. But first, we are going to talk about Battle for Azeroth. All of our listeners and our viewers just saw the trailer for Battle for Azeroth, and I've probably watched it 10 or 12 times. All right. Probably more like 20 or 30. Like, it still gives me chills. Every single time I watch it.
When Sylvanas screams for the Horde. Like,
oh my god, when she turns into the Banshee Queen.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
She does that, and Sourfang, like, basically goes berserk.
Yes.
How can you not want to be bored with that?
Yeah, I know, right?
What is wrong with all these Alliance people? Oh my god, we've just alienated like 2% of our fan base. I think 2% of people play Alliance, right?
Like even watching it, you get Sylvanas doing for the Horde, you get,
Anduin did for
doing for the Alliance, and it's just, it doesn't sound the same. It doesn't have that same feeling behind it as for the Horde.
Oh man, we're just
to me
we're losing viewers by the second here. Like, so many people have already clicked off of the podcast and they're like, screw these guys. Just maybe one of the best cinematics for all of the World of Warcraft games. Yeah. I certainly think so. So, obviously World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth is announced at BlizzCon, and recently they put out a developer Q&A where they went into more detail on, the allied races, the PvP, touched on the islands a little bit that you're going to be able to explore, talked about the war fronts, which are something I am extremely interested in, and then the bulk of the conversation was on class changes. And it is on a shift that Blizzard is taking. For the longest time, their adage was bring the player and not the class. Earlier on in World of Warcraft, you would bring the class and not the player because there were so many buffs that were specific to certain classes that, you had shamans and they were the only ones that had bloodlust. So you would have to bring the class and not the player. And then they kind of went over and they were like, okay, well, this is not great for the community. So we're going to kind of just divvy up all of these important class defining buffs among multiple classes, and classes started losing their identity. You had a shaman that was the only class with bloodlust, but now hunters have it, mages have it, leather workers have it, or anyone can have it. I mean, you can just buy drums and you have a mini list. So now they're saying sometimes you should bring the class, not the player. What do you guys make of that?
I really like it. I don't like having all of the classes feel homogenous. I like the idea of I mean, I miss buffing. Like, I remember I used to play a priest, and you would have to carry. I mean, I don't necessarily miss the reagents and stuff, but you know, going into a raid and buffing everyone up and getting everyone ready for the fight was something that was exciting. We enjoyed doing it, and yeah, while I don't want to carry a bunch of candles as a paladin, or you know, light feathers as a priest or something like that, I do miss the idea of having class-specific buffs. Like, a druid should have certain abilities that only a druid has, because functionally they're different from a priest, they're different from a paladin, they're their own type of character.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, like, there should be a reason why you want to play each specific class. When it comes to doing raids and whatnot, what they really need to do is they need to have a reason why you need to have, or why you would want to have, basically each class. Right? They need to make that balance, and I think that's what they're striving towards.
Yeah, I think what they need to do is they need to make it so that every class is unique in its own way, and each class has something that is attractive about it or speaks to a certain person, so that they want to go play that class. And if you make all of the classes equally attractive in their own way, then you're going to end up with a relatively even spread of classes.
Well, but you still need to have the classes be able to be competitive in whatever end game content it is you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you need to have a reason why they would all be brought in.
I mean, I think they can all be, you know, DPS can be equally strong, but have different finesse about them. So, yeah. I mean, they're going to have different abilities, clearly, but, you know, you're going to want to bring, instead of bringing, you know, 3 warriors or something like that, just because you want a bunch of cleave damage, you're going to want to bring some crowd control. You're going to want to bring some different elements into the fight so that, you know, you are balancing the fight a little bit more. And I think it'll be a good thing.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the issues. Like, let's take hunters and mages, for example, okay? They're both range classes. They both bring lust. They both have a ability similar to Ice Block, where they can soak damage, whether it be Ice Block or you know, Spirit of the Turtle or whatever it's called. And people look at this and they're like, well, these classes are basically the same. The class fantasy isn't really, you know, clicking with me, maybe, so I don't want to go with one over the other. So I'll just go ahead and go with whatever is highest on the meters. You know, whichever is having the best showing. And if they can find a way to make those two classes unique and make them speak equally to different players, then class balance among population is just going to end up working itself out. So we'll see if they can do it. This is something they've been working on forever, though.
Yeah, and I mean, balance is a difficult thing. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a moving target.
Yeah, because I mean, you'll have, you know, you'll try and fix one thing, and you'll overcorrect in one direction, and then you'll try and correct that issue, and you'll probably somehow overcorrect in the other direction again. I mean, there's always balancing back and forth.
Well, and the reality is they don't know how the metas are going to play out necessarily. Especially given some of the upcoming changes, like getting rid of like the on gear and on armor, they're not going to have like tier bonuses anymore.
Yes.
So the way that metas are going, like the meta game is going to work, no one really knows how it's going to be. So they don't really know. They're kind of going into it almost, I feel like, a little bit blind, because they're like, well, you know, who knows what these theory crafters are going to figure out. And these high end guilds, they're crunching numbers on levels that, you know, are staggering. So, you know, they don't really know where it's going to go and how it's going to end up.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being a lot harder to balance, because when you had tier set bonuses, you know, Blizzard could say, okay, we've got tier set bonuses. We need to balance the class around these set bonuses because we know every high-end raider is going to be using these set bonuses. And now, without those set bonuses kind of dictating the talents you take or the builds that you take and the abilities that you use, everything's going to be wide open.
Right.
So that'll definitely be interesting. They said the team over-prioritized spec identity over class identity and Legion development. There should be more class-wide strengths. And then, of course, there are some limits, such as perks on specs on hybrid classes. What do you guys make of that? Do you think that's true? Did you feel that spec identity ended up being more important than class identity in Legion?
Well, I mean, just by the fact that you had the artifact weapons themselves and they were inextricably bound to a spec, most certainly made it so that in Legion, the spec was almost overpowering the class, I felt.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to agree. I feel like that while, let's say, a boomkin is obviously a druid, like it feels like a separate class altogether because it follows while it may share some talents and things like that with other specs of druids, it kind of still feels like its own kind of breakaway segmented piece.
So basically like boomkin first, druid second, as opposed to druid first, boomkin second.
Right.
I can definitely see that. Let's touch on a couple other things they talked about. First off, we're going to touch on allied races. Already released if you pre-ordered it, right? Like you can go make one. Is that correct?
I think you have to do a quest chain. I'm
right.
not 100% sure.
Right. You have to like unlock it. And I think they released 4 of the 6 allied races.
Yeah, I believe it's only Zandalari and Dark Iron that are still waiting on.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have all the other ones. Basically, you need a level 110 on the faction on which you want to unlock the allied race. And then you go do a quest line. I think it involves maybe not necessarily doing a quest line, but you have to meet certain criteria. Like you have to be exalted with this particular faction, and you have to have completed, X storyline, got that done, and then you can maybe do a small quest, and that will unlock the allied races. You guys excited for allied races? Because I honestly couldn't care less.
If I were an Alliance player, I'd be pretty excited for allied races. I honestly feel like the Horde got the short end of the stick.
Okay.
In allied races. I mean, even just from a visual standpoint, the Void Elves and Lightforged Draenei are just amazing to look at. Like the Void Elves and it's so stupid that I'm focusing on cosmetics here.
Right.
Other bigger changes.
I mean, this is what we're talking about right now, so let's focus on the cosmetics.
Yeah, I mean,
there's nothing wrong with wanting to be pretty,
hair,
Dan.
like
exactly.
And, like the only Horde allied race that I was excited about when I saw it was the High Mountain Tauren, and it's only because they get moose horns.
Yep.
See, I'm the so I agree with you about the Alliance getting the better side of things, because I think Void Elves and Lightforged Draenei just look awesome. Yeah. I disagree with you though about High Mountain Tauren. That, like, to me, like that looks like a very, very weak cosmetic change. The Zandalari trolls, that seems really interesting to me because now you have trolls that are like upright and they're not all hunched over, and I feel like they can, like, you can actually get a better expression of their armor because they're not like hunched over, they're not like contorting their bodies in weird ways. So I think those could look really cool. But honestly, I'm very underwhelmed as a Horde player. I'm just like, whatever. Nightborn, give me a break. Like, we already have Blood Elves who are addicted to Arcane. Now we have Nightborn that are addicted to Arcane. So we're a bunch of, like, it just doesn't. Bunch
of addicts is what we are.
I really felt that when you had both Void and Light, in there. So Void Elves and Light Elves, and now you get to hear my dog moving around. That they very easily could have brought the Void Elves to the Horde side. They could.
Huh.
I really think they could have, and then you would have had this duality, right? Like you have the Void on the one side and the Light on the other. And that just exacerbates the whole Horde and Alliance thing some more, right?
I would have liked to be a little contrarian and had the opposite happen. Have the Lightforged Draenei go to the Horde, because now you can have like a Draenei player on the Horde. Like come up with some storyline, like they really allied themselves with the Horde side of this most recent fight, and they think this went really, really well, and they kind of the honor-bound Horde, they kind of,
the only
Can you imagine how upset the Alliance players would be?
You start losing the identity of Horde and Alliance when you start mixing the character models on each side.
Although, like, Night Elf and Blood Elf.
Night Elf, Blood Elf, like Nightborn.
Sure, but that's a lesser degree, right? Like, and I guess that would probably exacerbate things. So you do already have elves on both sides. Now, do we, if you add Draenei to both sides, now you're watering it down even more. I mean, the original intention, or at least the way that I feel about the Horde, is the Horde are the monstrous side, right? They're and in a way maybe more the adult side, because they are the less pretty side. They're the more monstrous side. I mean, hell, they made the Worgen for the Alliance because they wanted to have a monstrous race for the Alliance, because there was something about people being tired of playing pretty characters.
Pretty characters, yeah. I remember that. I'm I'll play these Alliance races when they come out, but it's certainly not going to make me go out and pre-order the game, yesterday, which we'll talk about yesterday, because yesterday was just absolutely ridiculous. But let's finish up on what they were talking about in this Q&A. So Islands, they sort of touched on, but they didn't really say much that we didn't already know. Said it's going to be a lucrative source of Azerite, which is basically the new progression system post-leveling for Battle for Azeroth. And then they said there might be islands with PvP modes where you might get honor. Warfronts, though. Let's talk about Warfronts. Because this sounds really interesting. So basically it is a format that is heavily inspired by the real-time strategy elements of Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3. And, maybe Warcraft, Orcs and Humans. We'll talk about that later. And you're basically like putting your hero on a Warcraft 3 map, if you can imagine this. Or maybe you're just like playing the hero class, and you're taking sort of the top-down camera that we had in, Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3, and then you're just pulling it down behind your character, and suddenly this is what Warfronts are. So it sounds like they're trying to kind of almost integrate, they say it's the RTS elements, but it sounds a lot more like MOBA elements to me. I was going to say, that kind
of sounds more like maybe Heroes of the Storm a little bit.
Yes, that's what I thought. So that'll be interesting. I'm excited to see how that kind of pans out. We've seen this before, where they try to take, kind of different games and different elements from different genres and integrate it into World of Warcraft, Plants vs. Zombies. The best one by far. Oh, Pokemon as well. Yeah. I'm interested. I'm certainly interested.
I'll give it a shot.
I mean, I think it could be a nice transition into whatever is going to be next for Warcraft. I think that eventually the MMO, it can't go forever, and they're going to want to kind of spin off something else. Like they've spun off Hearthstone. So I think it's going to give them an avenue to kind of reinvigorate people. I think you're right. It'll probably be very similar to a MOBA, but I'm hoping it's more like an RTS, so that it really kind of re-energizes and refocuses people on how much fun RTSs can be.
Mm-hmm. Well, we haven't.
Wasn't like Battle for Alterac Valley supposed to be like an RTS kind of thing, and it spun heavily away from that?
Not quite. Alterac Valley was supposed to be like a PvE PvP content. Like it was supposed to be a PvP fight with PvE objectives. So,
Okay.
but the problem that occurred was people just bypass all of the PvE elements of it just to
it was
like,
just basically
rush
a
to the
mad
end.
rush
They
to see
they
who
just
win. It was a race. It was a
Yeah,
race essentially.
and that's a function of the meta that developed for that battleground. That battleground, when people realized that the amount of honor you would get by completing all of these extra objectives wasn't worth the time it took to get those objectives, when you could just zerg to the end, get it done,
Mhm.
get your like whatever completion or like win or lose, it was more beneficial and you got more honor just for fast games. So they just bypass all of that PvE aspect of it, which I think is
Right.
unfortunate, because I used to love it back in vanilla, like 2, 3, 4 hour Alterac Valley fights. Those were it was so much fun. But you know, again, the meta shifted, and that's kind of how we ended up with it being the way it is now.
Yeah, I mean, players tend to take the path of least resistance,
And I think it was
especially
just
when it comes
more
to grinding
interesting that
stuff
they
out.
never tried to address that.
Yeah, well, we will see how these war fronts kind of shake out. Sooner than later, but not as soon as we want, because we finally have a release date. So that is super exciting. I believe that release date is September 26th. Is that correct?
Did they actually? Well, they said at
Well,
least by
on or before September
Yeah.
26th. So we
So
don't
it's a soft-
technically
it's
have a
soft
release date.
date.
But we know we can expect it by September 26th. I'd love to get y'all's opinions on this release date, because I don't think it is soon enough.
It's long, and I mean, I'm not even really a hardcore player, and I'm looking at that going, wow.
Yeah.
That you're telling me 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the content that's out now, like we're done. As far as I know, there's no other content patches coming in.
Yeah, they haven't said anything about any new,
Yeah,
content drops or anything like that.
So I mean, I'm sure that they'll have pre-release stuff, and they typically do pre-release stuff like generally a month
Right.
before thereabouts. So let's say, okay, so they're going to do pre-release stuff. Let's even be generous and say they'll do it 6 weeks beforehand. So you've now got what, 7.5 months still that we're waiting at that point. That's a long time to go for what's currently available.
Well, I think though that there's a lot of content that is still incomplete for a lot of people. I think the number of guilds that have completed the mythic level of the lightest, the Antorus raid, is still not even 10%. I mean, so there's still a lot of content to be completed. Whether or not people get tired of that content is another story. But I think they're probably going to do another Mythic Plus Invitational, which I think will kind of re-energize and kind of get people to focus on some of the other stuff. And I think that honestly, this is a nice chance for someone who doesn't necessarily play Alliance. Like right now, my main character is Horde. I don't have a 110 on the Alliance side, so this might give me a chance to level someone to 110 to kind of explore the other side and to get myself ready if I want to be a Void Elf or Lightforged Draenei.
So what you're saying is you're a traitor.
No, I'm for life. But I think there's things that can be done. Like people oftentimes will complain about World of Warcraft and say there's nothing to do. But the reality is there's still all of the micro holidays that they've created. There's still tons of content that's still available to do. It's just that people don't want to do it. And so if you find something that you enjoy doing, like in my case, I really enjoy doing Mythic Plus content, then you're never going to be bored of things, because you've always got things to look forward to. And I think while it is a far away release date, I think there's still going to be stuff that we can do in the meantime to kind of gear up and get ready. And once that expansion hits, we're going to see like people get reinvigorated into World of Warcraft.
I don't know. I think asking for 7 more months for PvE players, whether it be Mythic Dungeons or the raid, I think that's a lot. I think, Blizzard had said that they are going to do their best to increase the cadence of content releases. And to their credit, they did extremely well within the actual course of Legion. Maybe a little bit too good, because if you consider, the cadence at which these raids came out, maybe if they had spread them out, maybe 2 or 3 weeks more than they actually did, we'd have basically 2 more months of content available to us right now that we would have considered new, because it would have been new to us. And we wouldn't be looking at a 7.5 month drought of content. So, I don't know. All I know is, as someone that primarily raids, there is absolutely no way I'd want to do Antorus for the next, 7 or 8 months. That's just not going to happen.
And it's funny because it's funny that we have 3 people here who do 3 fairly different play styles. Like for me, World of Warcraft has always been about the story. So for me, I don't care about doing the harder modes of the raid. I am more than content of just going in with the raid finder and, going through and doing Antorus that way and finally getting the rest of the story. I really don't care if I go back in and do it in any other mode rather than in raid finder, because I'm just here for the story.
Which is a very valid thing to do. I mean, lots of people play for the lore. I mean, and I think that's one of the really smart things that Blizzard did, is create a story that's compelling, that makes people want to pay attention and makes people want to get engaged in the game. But I think there's still going to be stuff. I think Blizzard probably recognizes that towards the end of every expansion, they get a lot of attrition and a lot of people fall by the wayside. And
yeah, absolutely.
And then what ends up happening, though, is when that new expansion comes out, they get a huge spike in subscribers and a huge spike in sales, because everyone gets super excited. So there's going to be some core people that are going to stick through no matter what. I'm one of them, definitely. But then you're going to have, naturally, there's people already who are like, I'm bored of this content, and they're canceling their subscriptions. And I think Blizzard sees that, and I think they know. I do agree. I think they could have spaced out the dungeons and the raids a little bit further to kind of make it last a little bit longer. But ultimately, I think, they're going to get the spike that they're looking for when Battle for Azeroth comes out.
Sure, absolutely. And speaking of Battle for Azeroth, which we have been doing for the last 35 minutes, let's touch on, was it yesterday when pre-orders opened?
Yes.
Oh,
the nightmare.
God.
It was like patch day all over again.
Oh, this was absolutely wild. This was absolutely wild. So let's go over what happened. Pre-orders open. People try to buy their pre-orders, and they're met with giant queues. Like 5,000, 6,000 people. And the queue time says, okay, you can get your copy in like 15 or 16 hours. So they, maybe they close the window, they reopen it, and the queue's shorter because they worked some bugs out, and then they go and they order their copy. And, they click order, and they get an error saying we couldn't process your payment or something of that sort. So then they order it again. Same error. They try to order it again. And then this one finally goes through. So they're like, yes, got it, we're good. Come to find out, there was an issue with the new third-party processing payment company that Blizzard was using for these pre-orders. And all these people that saw this error message that said, we couldn't process your payment, were actually charged. So you've got people that tried to do this like 3 or 4 times, and they're out, $280, $320.
I've seen people on forums that got up to 18 times.
Yeah, just.
I mean, that's.
Now, did they actually get that charged? Because the way that like my credit cards work is that there is a difference between authorized transactions and posted, right?
So it's a pending charge. It's a hold on the money.
Yeah,
they were authorized. The pull never happened. The issue that comes up is for people who use debit cards. Like on a credit card, it's super easy because the way the transaction is processed is different from a debit card. On a debit card, it treats it as though the money came out. So it can take up to 10 days for your money to get returned if the vendor that you're shopping with doesn't actually collect the funds. So Blizzard's never actually going to collect that person's 18 attempts. They're only going to collect the one that finalized. The problem is that hold on the 17 others could stay on their account for upwards of, a week. Which to some people, that could be the difference of being able to make rent. It could be like, I don't have food for the week. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
It's wild. Some people's accounts overdrafted, and Blizzard has basically said, this is not our fault. This was an issue with the third-party payment processor that we were using, and you need to talk to your banking institution in order to see if there are any remedies. And it absolutely floors me because this is the first time we have ever had this issue. What prompted them to make such a giant change for their most popular titles pre-order? Like, I can see them doing this on a smaller title. And, maybe trying it out first. Or, maybe moving this to something else. Like, even just putting it into the store first. But...
Well, historically, Blizzard has a really, really bad track record when it comes to high-demand items being available online. I remember one year when we were trying to get BlizzCon tickets, it was so bad that literally their servers crashed, and there was actually a meme created because a warlock appeared with like a flag and it was like error 606 or something like that, where basically so many people tried to get BlizzCon tickets at once, and they were trying to manage it themselves at this time, that it literally crashed their servers. I mean, this isn't new. This specific problem may be new, but they've had issues going back for years with regards to their high demand products.
Right.
Like, they just can't handle the volume. And
I mean, and it's not even a Blizzard thing. Like, this actually, like, it recalls to my mind back when the Jinx clothing brand first put their it's another Blizzard product actually, but the Overwatch Ultimate hoodies on sale, and they had the same issue. Nobody was able. Now, I guess it's not the same issue. It's maybe the other direction. Nobody was able to actually order anything because there was this giant bottleneck in place, and it was, it took them close to probably 6 hours to resolve it. Not telling anybody that you could just call them and place an order through their call center people.
That's how I got mine, by the way. I got my Reinhardt one. I called them up and I was like, hey, are you guys aware your website is absolutely garbage right now? And they're like, yeah, we're trying to fix it. I felt so bad because they had probably like 3 or 4 people that were working the phones, and all of a sudden when people started to catch wind of the fact that you could call in, their phones just lit up and they were just like, uh-oh, here it comes.
And I totally get why they didn't tell anybody.
Oh yeah.
Like having worked in a call center myself, I totally get it.
So as though people getting charged multiple times is not enough. People log in yesterday ready to get their mythic caches, maybe to start doing some raids and stuff like that, and their characters are gone. I don't know how this happened, because this was not like they weren't pushing out a content patch. Like, this is basically just pretty standard weekly maintenance, maybe a couple hot fixes here and there, but it wasn't a large content release. Multiple people, like even multiple people within our relatively small group of friends that play World of Warcraft, try to log in, and at the character select screen, there are absolutely no characters.
I feel like this isn't a new thing, though. I feel like this happened before, and like I came across it once before. And
I can't remember a time that it's happened to me, but that's certainly not to say it hasn't happened before.
it wasn't that all of my characters were gone. It was like one or two.
I think, one of the changes, albeit one that we would think of as being minor, is the fact that there's now an ad to upgrade to Battle for Azeroth on the character selection screen. So that, and so my thought is that when they put that ad there, incorporating that like somewhere in whatever code they're doing, they broke something else that just links to the character selection screen. So like I'm willing to bet that it's something along those lines where like it's something that was so minor, but it's so buried in something, and then they all of a sudden nothing's working and everyone's freaking out. I mean,
well, everyone thinks their characters have been deleted.
True, agreed.
Like,
and that would be
the
terrifying.
Forums just lit on fire. And, if you're an adult, or even if you're a young adult or a teenager and you've played a lot of MMOs before, something like this is never going to actually happen. Your characters are not going to just suddenly get deleted. That is basically not a possibility. But you have a lot of younger people playing this game. You have a lot of adults that might be new to online gaming playing this game. And these people legitimately thought they had lost their characters forever.
Or that they had been hacked as well.
Well, yeah, that was another one. Everyone's like, my characters are gone. And people are like, well, do you have two-factor authentication? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, well, maybe you don't, whatever. God, it must have been a terrible day for the CSRs at Blizzard yesterday.
Oh, I'm sure.
I can't imagine. Probably lopped off like 2 or 3 years off of their life expectancy, yesterday.
I feel their pain. I've been there.
Oh man, so that is World of Warcraft over the past 3 days. This is basically everything that's been going on. We're at the 42-minute mark, so let's go ahead and kind of switch gears and let's talk about Overwatch, because there are some changes that we wanted to update you on as far as Overwatch is concerned. Number one, Xbox One X fans rejoice because you're getting full native 4K for Overwatch.
Hooray.
So you have a full native 4K 60 FPS title. You can finally be like, no, your PC's not better than my Xbox One X. You can finally say that. That's an exciting change for, the not so few number of Xbox One X's out there, because by most accounts, that console has done relatively well.
Yeah, I've got one.
Yeah? You like it?
Yeah, I like it. It's a great console. I love it. Just the visuals for the One X enhanced games are... Dan,
we're not talking about your Xbox One X. Let's talk about Mercy instead. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't hear me say anything.
Yeah.
A ton of Mercy changes. Evidently, the meta recently has been Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. Every theme has to have a Mercy. She's so damn good. She was basically an insta-lock every single game. There was a Mercy being played. So they made a lot of changes to her. Totally going to use the wrong terminology here. Is it her ultimate?
Her ultimate.
Okay, I got it. So Valkyrie no longer makes Resurrect instant. It no longer grants a bonus Resurrect charge. The speed bonus Guardian Angel receives when activating Valkyrie has been decreased by 50%. Of course, Valkyrie makes her fly around, so that's what they're referring to there. And the duration has been reduced from 20 seconds to 15 seconds. That's a lot of changes.
Yep, rip Mercy.
That's rough. What do you guys think about it?
I think it's necessary.
I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about before with balance. They felt that Mercy was too overpowered when she could do her mass res.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was just so heartbreaking when, say, you were D.Va and you got a 4 or 5 player multi-kill with your with your self-destruct, and here comes Mercy herpa-derping along and just mass reses them all. and they're like, okay, so we're gonna fix this. We're gonna make Mercy, we're gonna change her ultimate so that she can't just bring up all these people. If you wipe out, you know, you do a 3/4 team kill, she can't just bring them all back up right away. So we're gonna do this. We'll make her, you know, be able to fly. She can resurrect people quicker, and it'll be great. You guys are gonna love her.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit too much.
A little too much.
Yep.
Well, it's forcing a change in the meta, and I think that Blizzard also has to keep in mind that there's now Overwatch League, and to entertain their audience, they don't want to have every team comped exactly the same, and so they want to keep
that's fair.
The meta really diverse and have teams be forced to come up with, okay, well, look, you know, Mercy may not be that great right now, but let's try this other healer, let's try this other strategy. And it's that level of like experimentation and that brings with it more excitement, and hopefully will help kind of develop new metas and more malleable metas, so that it's not always the same cookie cutter teams going up against, oh, it's this map, we have to have this team.
So are the teams that are playing today, are those changes in the Overwatch League for Mercy?
They are not. So they are going to be implemented in Stage 2, which begins February 21st.
Okay, because I was going to say that would be a very weird way to go about it. It's like, hey, guess what?
Yeah, no,
we're changing the rules mid-game.
Yeah, so they're going to leave Stage 1 the way it is, and then they're going to integrate the changes into the Overwatch League when Stage 2 starts.
Okay, so late February.
Yeah, February 21st.
Okay.
Which also gives Mercy mains a chance to practice somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Junkrat got a little bit of a nerf.
Minor nerf.
Yeah, the concussion mine will now deal less damage to targets further away from the explosion center. I don't think that's going to change much of anything.
No, and I mean, most people use the concussion mines as a AoE when somebody was up close and in their face anyways, and where their regular grenade launcher is going to be too inaccurate. So they were typically using that to just get quick and easy kills on either weaker characters like Tracer, or to just knock them back or knock themselves back to just create some distance as well. I don't think it's going to be a big deal whatsoever.
No, I don't think it's really going to change much of anything. So we covered World of Warcraft. We covered Overwatch. A little bit. We're going to cover one thing, not Blizzard related today. That one thing is going to be iZombie, which is a show that Dan loves. And I love it. And the new season is starting February 26th. So that is extremely exciting. If you haven't seen iZombie, well, you should first go watch A Christmas Prince. Have you guys seen A Christmas Prince?
No.
Oh my God, you guys missed that meme wagon, huh? Go check it out on Netflix. There was that tweet that Netflix put out a while back. It was around Christmas, obviously. And it was when Netflix was basically going over the number of views and aggregating them based on specific customers. And somebody had watched A Christmas Prince like 17 times. And they sent out a tweet and they're like, what did somebody do to you that you needed to watch A Christmas Prince 17 times? And of course, that movie has the same lead actress, Rose McIver, which is the actress that plays in iZombie. And oh, good times. Funny stuff, guys. You're just going to have to trust me on this one.
I'll take your word for it.
Take my word for it and go watch A Christmas Prince. And when you're done watching that, go watch iZombie, because as good as Rose McIver is in A Christmas Prince, she is definitely better off dead. And by that, I mean playing an iZombie. Oh, come on, guys. Come on,
That
guys.
hurt me on the inside.
Oh,
You were worried about us losing subscribers over the Horde stuff, and you pull out that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had to get rid of the last two somehow, right? Like, there we go. Back to the very beginning. And guys,
Full circle.
I think that's all we have to talk about today. Can you guys think of anything else you want to talk about? Is that it? It feels like a lot.
I think that's it. I think we're good.
All right, guys. Well, we would love to hear what you think about today's podcast. If you want to talk about Battle for Azeroth, or, you know, maybe you're a salty Mercy player and you just need to scream at someone, feel free to do it in the comments down below. Once again, this has been Midnight Launch. I am David.
And I'm Dan.
And
Pedram,
aka Ozzy. Guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we will see you next week.